Here are the fantasy follows, top 5 players you can believe in, and the top 5 players you should be aware of for the 2020 fantasy football season. Believe in Tom Brady. This one might be a no-brainer, but with 6 Super Bowl rings, you don't switch teams without a good reason. He is gone there to break records. Working under a Bruce Arians offense, high in the pass, assets like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then they added Rob Gronkowski, and then they added Leonard Fournette. This is going to be a huge season for Tom Brady. The last 2 years, he was QB 13 and 12. And this year, if you have him on your roster, you probably drafted him in the 7th or 8th round. But expect Tom Brady to throw it all over the place this year. Beware of Aaron Rodgers. It is hard to put Aaron Rodgers on this list. Last year, he was QB 10. The year before, he was QB 6. But what is Green Bay doing? I don't understand. Instead of drafting a wide receiver where they really had need, they trade up to get another quarterback in Jordan Love. We know that new head coach Matt LaFleur in his second year wants to run the ball. So does Rodgers go out there with a chip on his shoulder this season? He still has Davante Adams, who is a great player in both regular and fantasy. And Aaron Jones had a huge year last year on the ground. But it seems like they would rather run it. There's really no other reason for Aaron Rodgers to be on this list. He clearly still has the ability. Believe in David Johnson. We already got a sneak preview on David Johnson this past Thursday, and we know what he once was in fantasy before he got hurt. Well, then Cliff Kingsbury came to town, and everything changed. Now David Johnson finds a home in Houston. The last 2 years, the Texans made Carlos Hyde, who was cut by Cleveland, and Lamar Miller look decent and fantasy relevant, both of them. And David Johnson is a much bigger talent than both of those players at this point in their careers. Also, his value in the passing game makes him a PPR asset. There is no more DeAndre Hopkins in Houston. Somebody has to get those targets. So the question is, which of Houston's wide receivers is going to catch balls underneath this year? Is it Will Fuller? He's a deep threat. Is it Kenny Stills? He's a deep threat. Is it Brandon Cooks? He's a deep threat. I mean, perhaps Randall Cobb will fill that role to some extent, but the PPR value David Johnson can return is tremendous. And for where you got him in the draft, he could make your season if he ends up returning to form. Beware of Aaron Jones. Remember everything we just said about Aaron Rodgers? We may as well just repeat most of it. What are we doing in Green Bay? 16 rushing touchdowns for Jones last season. And not only has Jamal Williams cut into a lot of his potential in past seasons, but the Packers go out and draft A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round. So congratulations on your season, Mr. Jones. Please meet your replacement. I mean, in reality, how could Jones not be a big part of Green Bay's offense this year? But I don't know how you're not concerned, and that's likely why he was the 12th running back off the board in most drafts, when he easily should have been higher than that based on his results last season. So you got to think it's questions about Dillon and what role he's going to have. It'll remain to be seen if Jones ends up splitting and losing more touches to either of those two players, Williams or Dillon. Believe in DeAndre Hopkins. Not that you never have before, but traditionally wide receivers that change teams, they don't necessarily work out the way you would think. Well, this is the exception. Hopkins went as the 5th wide receiver picked in redraft leagues this year. So while he was in Houston, remind me how many different quarterbacks Hopkins caught balls from, because I lost count. So the switch to Kyler Murray and a new offense is really not a concern to me that it otherwise might be when wide receivers change teams. Add in what Cliff Kingsbury's offense is in Arizona, and Hopkins is set to produce in fantasy again this season. And if you really need to understand his value, Just look at Houston's Thursday night loss to Kansas City. I mean, are we missing a piece much there? That loss in Houston is a gain in Arizona. And also likely a big part of why a lot of fantasy players feel that Kyler Murray is in for a big season as well. Beware of Stefon Diggs. So this is an odd one because if you drafted Diggs, you got him in the 7th or 8th round. So that's a steal for a player who was the overall wide receiver 10 2 years ago. But here's the question. Diggs wanted out of Minnesota. The Vikings turned more and more to the run last year. So now he joins a Buffalo offense that also relies heavily on the run. Last year, the Vikings averaged 133 yards on the ground per game. Last year, Buffalo averaged 128 yards on the ground per game. Pass yards, virtually the same. In fact, the Bills were actually slightly less than the Vikings for the year. So the difference here is that now Diggs is the clear number one, where he was more the 1A to Adam Thielen's 1A in Minnesota. You still have John Brown and Cole Beasley there, but Buffalo, with their receiver core, now has the potential to throw it more. But really, the standard question you ask is about Josh Allen and his accuracy. How does this work out for Diggs' fantasy value? I mean, full disclosure, I'm part of Bills Mafia, so I really hope that Diggs has a huge season this year. And really, his on-field impact with the Bills could still be much greater than his fantasy impact might be. Believe in Hayden Hurst. Who? Yeah, Hayden Hurst, the tight end that was squarely behind Mark Andrews in Baltimore last year, is now in Atlanta. And he's replacing Austin Hooper, who's now in Cleveland. And Hooper had a huge season last year. This is a great breakout situation for Hayden Hurst. Atlanta is going to throw the ball. Those targets are available, and I'm guessing opposing defenses probably know who Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley are. That's big upside for the 11th tight end off the board in redraft leagues. Beware of Rob Gronkowski. Yes, Gronk is back with his best bud, TB12. But can you name the last tight end who actually excelled under head coach Bruce Arians? I mean, O.J. Howard all but disappeared from fantasy last season. And it really wasn't that much different than that for Arians in Arizona either. So now you throw Gronk into an offense that still has Howard and Cameron Brate. And oh yeah, he hasn't been on the field since 2018. And in that year, he finished as tight end 11. So a big offensive season overall in Tampa Bay would not surprise me, but there are a lot of mouths to feed there. The number one believe is Mark Ingram. We already talked about Ingram today. In his second season in Baltimore, I see no reason why Ingram won't give you great return on the 4th or 5th round draft pick that you invested in him. I mean, this just does not look like the situation to me where the rookie just gets slotted in. This is an effective back, and in a year with little training camp time for Dobbins to work his way in, expect Mark Ingram and the Baltimore run game to continue right where they left off last season. The number one beware in New York, Le'Veon Bell. Really, raise your hands if you guessed this one before you saw his name. I mean, last year Bell returned after sitting out a season only to find that his new coach never really wanted him in the first place. Or at least that's how it seems in Adam Gase's offense. You're talking about one of the top pass catchers out of the backfield in his career on a team that had nothing but wide receiver issues. How do you not find a way for Bell to be tremendous on this team? Last year, with 15 games played, Bell was 7th in targets among all running backs. Leonard Fournette was ahead of him. In the 2 seasons prior to that Bell played at least 15 games, 2017, 2nd in targets only to Christian McCaffrey. 2014, second in targets only to Matt Forte. I really don't see anything changing here under Gase. A player can't showcase his skills if not given the opportunity to play to their strengths. And unfortunately, even if those skills are still there for Bell, I think it would be an upset to actually see them used there. So here are your lists. Top 5 believes. Number 5, Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Number 4, David Johnson in Houston. Number 3, DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona. Number 2, Hayden Hurst in Atlanta. And number 1 in Baltimore, Mark Ingram. And your top 5 beware. Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones in Green Bay, 5 and 4 respectively. Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, although I hope Diggs is great. Rob Gronkowski in Tampa. And Le'Veon Bell with the New York Jets. Don't forget, every Sunday we are here with the TFF Live Sunday pregame show from 12 noon up until game time. We'll go through all the information to get you ready for your matchups. Be sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications so you can join us before the start of every show.